بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. مساء الخير جميعاً. اليوم معنا حلقة جديدة من Leaders Mike مع الدكتورة منال المقوشي. منال الله يسعدك يعطيك العافية. احنا we know Manal through the 20 Leaders program and a lot of us have grown to love you.
Thank you.
So we would like to know a little bit more about who you are as a person.
Okay. أول شيء السلام عليكم. It's a pleasure being here and thank you for the invitation. Who am I? Such a complicated story. I will say in a nutshell, I am a TCK, a third culture kid. So I grew up in, even though you can say different countries, I, as a child, and still sometimes refer to them as different worlds. So I grew up in the States, and then my parents were studying there, we would end up coming to back to Saudi. So a third culture kid is essentially, it's a term that was coined by a sociologist in the 1950s. It essentially means a child in their developmental ages or years that they do not have the culture of their parents, nor do they have the culture of their host country, and they create a third. And that's something that happened to me. So it was not easy, I will say, but it took time to find my own. It was trying to find out where I belonged. And all of sometimes I call it the traumas, or the difficulties and the goodness, all of it made me who I am as a leader, personally, and made me as a leader in a professional setting.
Amazing. So third culture, which means every time you would visit Saudi, right?
Yes.
And how did that feel for you?
Who it's not so much, it's that you take bits and pieces from the different cultures, so you don't necessarily belong anywhere. So I wouldn't, how do you describe it? So when you come to Saudi, I'll give you one very fun story. That when I was a kid, of course, in the States, you smile, right? You look people in the eye and you smile. So I came to Saudi, I was maybe 6 years old, and I'm smiling and I'm looking at everybody. I think if you know, this is, we'll say years and years ago, that was not culturally appropriate. So I learned, you don't smile. You don't look people in the eye. It has a completely different meaning here. Okay. Go to the States. I'm not smiling. I'm not looking people in the eye. What's wrong with her? Is she antisocial? So as a child, it ends up, you get a bit lost within the different worlds, and then you start to learn to change. So I would say putting on different faces, depending on which country I was in. And again, it took years to come to the point where I started to recognize the strengths. And most third culture kids are very resilient. Mm-hmm. They are strong when it comes to multicultural communication and global viewpoints. So I grew up in different worlds. I'm able to maybe dialogue with different cultures, different people, and that has obviously helped me in my job interculturally and working in education, where I had a very large team from many different nationalities.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. So on that note, maybe Manal, you can tell us a bit about your professional career and how you started off maybe with school and then afterwards your careers and so on.
Okay, so I am the product of two parents who are professors. So I grew up in a home where academia was very much a part of it, and maybe it was a blessing as well, because my parents, being in academia, mean they didn't have rigid schedules. So they were around a lot. We'd have lunch together. They were there to help us. And it also gave me a different viewpoint when it came to education. So I started over a long time ago. But for over 20 odd years in education, I started in schools and then moved to university. And in the university, I started as a TA, a teaching assistant, worked my way up to professor, and then I had a very set plan of what I wanted in the university, which I achieved. And then came the shift professionally. I was in a semi-government and then shifted on to government, working currently in the Authority for People with Disability.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah.
So as working with international relations and cooperation.
So do you feel that being that your parents were in academia, did that sway you? Or was it something that you felt that you were connected with? Or did you ever think you wanted to be something else?
Oh, okay, I'm not sure. I think as a child, I was very much into, which is still something I'm into, sports, into education.
And you're known for
sports
this, by
and
the
arts,
way,
yes.
mashallah. Yes.
Sports, arts, I loved moving around. I loved talking to people. I loved communities. I loved meeting new people. So on the contrary, I found, I think for the first time when I started working in a school, I found joy. And it was maybe, I think, for those that have ever worked in education or worked with bigger teams, maybe the most beautiful thing about working in a classroom is it's never the same. You teach a class of 30, and you did your class and the students are so happy and it was so effective and you're so proud and confident. And you're like, I did it. I figured out how to teach. Then you go to another class and you absolutely flop because it doesn't work. Each student is completely different and each class is completely different. And I think that's what I always appreciated and that's what I've always loved is being, again, it probably comes from being a third culture kid, is I like change. I like situations that are more dynamic and not static. And teaching was a way that
I was
it gave me
just
that.
actually going to say the fact that you're so multicultural probably gave you the ability to be so flexible from one class to another.
Yes.
Is there a story you want to share in one of your classrooms that ever happened? If you can think of something.
Oh dear, so many. I think maybe, and again, this is something that I will, especially when I'm mentoring, is telling people, is maybe some of the biggest mistakes that I made in my classrooms were the most beneficial to me. Did I do a good job with my students? Yes, and I'm proud of all of the achievements and successes, but it was those times where I made a mistake, and sometimes quite big mistakes were the ones where I grew. And I think it teaches you in life with students is trying to find, again, this goes to life, is trying to find the balance where it's not too easy and it's not too hard. And trying to make sure that those that are receiving the information, because you can teach all you want, but there is no guarantee that what you teach is what they learn. So you have to try to make sure that message, and it's about feedback, it's this loop. And I would ask my students, the way I speak now is quite slow. I used to speak very fast. And I would do something at the end of my classes. I tell my students anonymously, I'll go step outside. I want you to take a piece of paper and give me feedback. And I tell them be as harsh as possible because I needed them to give honest feedback. And over again, you talk too fast. So it was something, and it was maybe a very fun and not so fun experience is I didn't know how to speak slowly. So I would talk really slowly, which is not normal. And it took me a while until I got that balance. And it probably helped. I lived in the States, I lived in the United Kingdom. That probably helped being in different environments, teaching international students, and then learning naturally how to enunciate, to speak more clearly, and to be able to speak in a slower way so that people can receive the message.
It can be hard because it's what you know. And when you come, I totally understand. Excellent. Allah ya'tik al-afiyah, Manal. Now, we know you're very active, mashallah, tabarakallah, sports. And mashallah, so there's a few things that, we're very proud of you, of course.
Thank you.
So please tell us on the different activities that you do and how that is for you on a personal level, and then if it impacts your leadership in any way.
Oh, I'm sure it does. So I'm not one, since I was young, I'm not one to be sitting in movie theaters. Don't hold this against me. My brother does. He said one time, he's like, I think you're adopted because they love sitting in cinemas. They love watching movies. And I would choose while they do that, I'd go walking. So that was something, I just liked moving around. It gave me joy. And this is something that I still do. I went to Kilimanjaro for the second time quite recently. I search for usually very long hiking paths. I enjoy the peace. I go out to the desert. I sometimes drag people along with me, early morning walks. I believe there's something that touches your soul when you go back to nature, and it takes you away from the busyness of the city and the noise. If you go back, it refreshes you. And I would do this as well with the stress, that sometimes I would wake up quite early in the morning, 3, 4 in the morning, and go climb stairs until I was exhausted. So I'm too tired to react, and it was helpful. But this is how I love being in nature, and it makes the day much better no matter the stress that you have.
There's something special about being in nature. So, leadership.
Yes.
Manal, the leader. Tell us more.
Manal, the leader. Leadership was not, again, as I said, when it goes back to the TCK, leadership wasn't necessarily easy because leadership comes from within, and you have to find your own strength, you have to be confident, you have to be aware of yourself in order to lead. And I think one of the very first time I became a true leader, this was holding a very big position in the sense that I had over 80 different faculty. This is when I was working in the university. And I hadn't yet held on to being a committee member of holding the other campuses in the other cities. Trying to make a major change, especially when you're in universities, where there is, and again, I don't know that it's just universities, but people generally are resistant to change because they don't know where their place is. So as a leader, it was learning from, I'd have one-on-one meetings with not just faculty, but with students to understand what they wanted. So me as a leader, I was coaching, mentoring, working with a different team, and I'm trying to find a specific example. Before COVID, I was trying to shift the department to technology. We were very much paper-based.
Wow, so you were already ahead. Okay.
It ended up being a great thing.
Yeah,
so people were very much paper-based. Every faculty member would send their students the work or their homework through email. I didn't find it very efficient, and I wanted students, we had a system that's called Blackboard. Blackboard in and of itself was a great platform where you could, because the university, and I'll give you a little bit of background, they all competed for positions. So because they're competing, you needed to make sure that they had the same material, that it was fair. So I started slowly pushing them onto Blackboard, creating, as a friend once told me a long time ago, you can take a horse to water, but you can't guarantee it drinks. He said, change the temperature. So I changed the temperature. It was about, and again, it goes back to being empathetic.
So Matt, change the temperature. A little
Change
more
the
on
temperature
that, yeah.
is to be more creative. So the way I am as a leader is I don't think necessarily outside the box, I do. But I look at that box and I wonder how it exists. Why do the rules exist as they do? Is there a more efficient way of doing things? Why do we have this policy? Why do we have this regulation? If it's efficient, wonderful. If it's not, how can we make it better? So by reorganizing and slowly shifting the students, it took over 2 years because I had to slow down majorly for them to go on board.
And this was before COVID,
This was before COVID.
Okay.
Gradually moved everyone on board. It was that fear of change. They started to adjust. They started to get better with it. The accumulation of it was when COVID, and this was on, I remember it clearly, March 8th came down, the Ministry of Education said we are going online.
Wow.
Gathered all the teachers together. We got this. We had another meeting and it was more for the other campuses, but for my team, it was like, we can do this. You've already done X, Y, and Z. We already have the information. Within 2 days, we'd shifted online.
That's amazing.
For our students. I didn't know that that's what I was working towards, but it was
it's
very
amazing.
much a gift. And it was mostly because the faculty themselves, as a leader, if you can create an environment that's safe, if you can create an environment where you are willing to be questioned, the faculty will grow, or the employees will grow. They'll question you, they'll grow, they'll develop. I had faculty that were, let's say the absentee or the I'm forgetting the word now, just let's just say absences, et cetera, of faculty decreased within those 2 years. More students were there because we created a community with the other faculty. So COVID was something that, it's a bad time, not necessarily a good time, but it was very much, I think it showed me, even me personally, my skills as a leader in an emergency situation. It was 2 years, very, very long for us of being online, but...
Yeah, education, I think it took them some time to go back. And I think COVID was just, I know this was mentioned earlier in one of the interviews, that COVID was just a time where leaders were being tested.
Yes.
And those who were visionary and were able to see things, I mean, as you mentioned, you weren't even ready for it. But subhanAllah, the fact that you were already working on it just made it easier for you guys.
It shows, I think, beyond anything, is that everything that we do nowadays, we have Vision 2030. A lot of the things that we're doing are preparing for the future.
Absolutely.
And we should plan for the future and not plan for now. It doesn't necessarily make sense that we're saying right now we have this, this issue or this challenge. We're solving for the future.
Yeah. But you mentioned something when you said, I asked you to describe your leadership style, you said that I'm a kind of person who thinks outside the box.
I check the box itself, but sometimes I can think. But it's about being creative, and again,
creativity.
Yeah. It's I won't ever quit, but I will try to figure out what's a different means of resolving an issue. So I had some people that were barriers to change. So it wasn't about they're not cooperating and they're if you want to put any negative term towards them, it wasn't. There's obviously a reason they're being hesitant. Maybe they're scared of change. Maybe they don't know what their place is within that change. Maybe there's underlying reasons. So part of it was lobbying, part of it was sitting with different people to figure out, why do you not want this change, or what's in your head in the first place? So for some it was a fear, so we resolved it, and I had to compromise a lot. Some of it they weren't ready for. So it was, even if you have a vision, you need to make sure your team is on board, because it takes a team, it takes a village and a community to move forward. And if they're not with you, no matter how brilliant your system is, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah. I think, you mentioned change a lot, and I think somebody whose passion is in change, it's tough. It's tough when things are changing as a leader, because as you mentioned, you're dealing with different kind of mindsets and people, and managing and trying to deal with this versus this and this, and it's like you have to have so many different hats on at the same time. Amazing, Manal. Manal, so we're getting to know you now more. I'm sure there's more that you want to tell us. But of course, in the scenario of how these things run, there's always more to discover about you, aside from your education, aside from your professionalism, and aside from what you do on the job. What can we come to Manal for, other than what we know of you here?
So I think it goes back to, again, the box. In every place that I've worked or volunteered or mentored, and this is in different countries and different cities and different places, again, it takes you ages to find the pattern, is I'll always end up creating a community around me. And I don't mean a community like a community of friends. I mean, whatever institution I'm with, I actually create an organized community. And it took me a while to realize that I was actually doing that. Mostly because I don't want to be the lead. I don't want to be the one in the front of, hey, me. I tended to do it from behind the scenes, and I appreciate being behind the scenes more than I do want to be in the scenes. So with postgraduates, with employees, I would create a community, and I realized that, and maybe this is one of the strength that I have, is I can look at a situation or a place or an institution, and I can see where the fault lines are in terms of communication, in terms of gaps. And the gaps can be from people not feeling that they belong. And that, again, is something, TCK, you sometimes feel that you don't belong, you recognize it very easily. And again, I've done this, and through trial and error, I've gotten, hopefully, better at this, is that I can go in and see how we can, not with much money, but to try to create an environment or an ecosystem that is more inclusive, in whatever sense that means, of making sure that information, and I think a lot of people, they underestimate simple information. And a lot of people assume, no, I'm sure they understand. No, I'm sure they know. What if they don't? You're wasting a lot of time expecting these employees, students, whatever they may be, or whomever they may be, to take the time to catch up. And if you have new employees, they're not going to go, hi, I've been here a month, I still don't understand what's going on. No one is going to say this. But if you create a system where you have an orientation, and that's something I did in the university with faculty. It took me a long time to convince upper management that it was necessary. But not only did it mean that everyone is on the same page, the university is big. We have many different colleges, many different programs. I needed to make sure that the faculty understood what each college did, what each program did, because the teacher was the avenue to the students. If they knew the information, they can teach better. They can be better representatives. Same thing with employees. If you want your employees to be aware, to understand how things link, you need to make sure they're on the same page, that they understand. Oh, in a nutshell.
Maybe one last question, Manal.
Sure.
Yeah. What's next for Manal?
The next mountain or the next?
I love that. MashaAllah.
As far as maybe the next steps, personally, professionally, is looking at different ways to help, to support. I'm a part of the Saudi Federation for Rowing. I'm in an advisory committee.
Please tell us more about that, because I know, mashallah. Yeah, please.
Again, love sports, love everything related to it. And as someone who came to Saudi in a time before Vision 2030, I was very much a part of organized sports. I was a gymnast, I was a swimmer, I was competitive in many things. And then you came here, it was like hitting a wall.
Yeah.
And so how blessed are the new generation and ourselves as well. There's people my age and younger that are a part of the sports teams and federations. Sport federations teach you, and depending on the sport, that you can work individually, you're competitive, but you can also work as a team. It strengthens you. It helps teach you how to lose gracefully. It teaches you a lot of different skills that you may not learn in other forms. So to me, especially with the Saudi Federation for Rowing, we also have, we've opened it to be more diverse, having people with disabilities as a part of it. So it's adaptive rowing.
So you're mixing, mashallah, both worlds.
To have it there. This is the board as well, working really, really hard on this. It's teaching people more about life. It's another window, another way to view the world. So with that, with hiking, hopefully I'll find another mountain, whether it's flat or going up high. Altitude kills me, but that's maybe the next steps.
Amazing, Manal. Well, it's been wonderful to get to know you. I have a lot of more questions, but I do want to open, mashallah, tabarakallah, to this incredible audience. I want to give them a chance to ask. What do you think?
Sure.
Yeah? So we are ready for any questions?
Allah يعطيك العافية, Manal. One thing that inspires me about you, and frankly inspires me about everyone in this group, when I see a leader like you with all of these activities and all of these memberships and all of these participations, the first question that comes to mind is, how do you organize your time?
It was a question that I asked myself a long time ago, and I think somebody slightly told me off, is that we do have the time. It's just how you organize it, how you choose. We have someone within our cohort, choose what to lose. So you decide how you're going to use your time. What is it, the endless hole, the wormhole when you're online or you're talking to someone chatting. So in the end, it's what is important, what gives the greatest outcomes. And I think and I think this is something all of us do, some of us may be more advanced in this, is that sometimes we put ourselves last. We're more selfless. And it took me a long time to realize being selfless is actually being quite selfish. Because if you're doing a lot for your family, for those around you, if you end up suffering, they're going to suffer. So you need to put yourself first, or at least as a priority. And I started to do that, prioritizing my own time, making sure that for my own health and well-being is a priority. I'm still not very good at it, but I am trying. But making sure what has the best outcome, not just for myself and my family, but for those around me.
كيف حالك دكتورة؟
الحمد لله. خالك.
حسألك سؤال سألته من الجيل الجديد. من أقول لهم عشان تكونوا قادة، عشان تكونوا يعني inspiring, influential. قالوا ليش لازم أكون قائد؟ مو مهم. إيش رأيك؟
That's actually true. I mean, you can be a leader. Again, it depends on how you're defining. A leader is only a position. It's not a position. You're a leader if you inspire. So from the time you're a student within your classroom, you can be a leader to your group. You are a role model. When you're moving on within sports, you can be the captain or the co-captain. There's so many different ways to lead. It doesn't have to be a recognized, fancy, powerful position. Leading is about helping and giving back to your community and having an impact on those around you.
الله يعطيك العافية دكتورة منال, very inspiring. عجبني كيف إنه أنت you are on the board of the rowing team. Now, I see rowing to be a teamwork as well. So, is there any relation or have you connected in any way the teaching يعني الكابابيلتيز هذه مع concept اللي هو الrowing تحديدا, لأنه you're into a lot of sports, بس rowing, teaching, there's a lot of teamwork and it's a lot of team building, and I see a connection between the two. So could you يعني elaborate more about that, or have you actually connected it in any way?
Again, through the times, maybe it took me a while to understand that I work better in a community. And I like working, I think everyone, there's some that believe they want to create a really big ripple in the world and that everyone's going to know what they did. I'm perfectly satisfied creating, as they said, the butterfly wing. I want to impact those around me, whether it's something very minor or something big. And I think we all do it. It's another way, I think, of looking at, sometimes I mentioned the traumas in the past. A trauma to me ends up being a benefit to someone else. They learn a lesson, maybe in the way that I reacted, maybe in what happened, so that they don't make that same mistake. So it's a way of looking at the world in a positive way. And working as a team is what happens to one member helps the whole.
Thank you, Dr. Manal, على المحاضرة الحلوة. I have a lot of respect for a teacher because I think it's one of the most difficult jobs and one of the most important jobs. And whatever we have in all our organizations are basically نتاج what you do, guys. My question is, how do we make teachers love their jobs? There are so many teachers that I meet that are in this job because it was the only job that was offered to them. And a lot of them might not love it. And for me, a student who is an exceptional is basically نتاج a teacher who was exceptional at that moment. What do you think we can do to have more of teachers like you?
Thank you. It's a great question. And I think it's a global issue as well. I think one of the challenges that we have here, yes, it's almost like a default. I'll be a teacher. Teaching, I think one of the problems, or one of, let's say, the challenges that we have is in the system, sometimes there's no difference between doing an exceptional job and just doing exactly what you need to do. And so for a teacher, once they lose that spark of hope, it becomes a challenge. But I think even more than that, and I know that it's changing and there's a lot of developments with the Ministry of Education, but one of the, again, challenges that I see, not just within education, but across the board, is I'm very practical. It's wonderful to have theories. Theories are great, but they're not necessarily good for on the ground. And sometimes people will see this amazing curriculum from Harvard or from Cambridge or this beautiful thing, but let's call it a square, and you're bringing it to a circle. Unless you make the changes necessary for the culture, for the context, no matter how amazing that curriculum is, it's not going to work. And unfortunately, sometimes the blame comes back down to educators. All of them are pieces of a greater toolkit or of a greater system. Every one of them needs to have their part and needs to be respected for their part for it to work well together. And that's something I think we're very much still working on. Does that answer the question?
Resistance to change.
Resistance to change.
Do we have any more questions? All right.
I think I'm gonna have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manal.
Thank you.
It was such a pleasure to have you here today.
My pleasure.